Hey pilots, Drain Man here, and today I have got a very special video. I am so excited, and as you know, I am stuck on that H7 hype. I built that H7 flight controller not too long ago, and I was just so impressed with the way that it flew, the way that it handled, just everything. You could feel the responsiveness in the sticks because the MCU is just moving that freaking fast. So I am super excited today because we are looking at another H7 flight controller, and this one here is a very special breed. This is by FlightOne. So in this video here, not only are we going to build it, we are also going to set it up, and then we're going to take it for a flight. So you better hold on to your seat because we are going. Let's go. Woo! All right, pilots, I am super excited. All right, so right here, I have the Lumineer QAV-S frame, and this was a really cool edition of the QAV. They have the QAV-R, the QAV-R2, the QRAV-R Schizo. They've got a ton of different versions, and this one here is actually quite impressive. Now, my initial thoughts assembling the frame, not so fun, but once I got it together, I mean, this thing is pretty beefy. I mean, look at this. This stuff is pretty freaking strong. Now, also, it has the drop top. Let me show you. So if I take out this one screw that I have that's holding the top plate on, boom. Wow, look at that. I'm able to actually take off the top plate and I can still keep my front plate on. For the guys like me who run a GoPro all the time, it sucks trying to take apart your frame and not dismount your freaking GoPro and your GoPro mount. So that brings me to the H7 Lightning flight controller, and yes, I went with the heads-up version. Why not? It's plug and play. It's got a graphical OSD, and it's running at 500 megahertz. Ah! Now, of course, I had to go with the Afterburner 4-in-1 by FlightOne. I'm not going to run a FlightOne flight controller and not FlightOne ESC. Can I? Yes, but I don't want to do that. Now, what comes with this flight controller? Let's find out. I'm going to dump out my contents right here. Okay, so we have got a important, please make sure you visit our website so that you can read the manual. Do not solder jumpers without removing the resistors. Consult our website for the latest pinouts. That's very important, guys. If you bought this flight controller, do not just start jumping the jumpers. They gave you a red tag. Pay attention. It's red and it's tagged. I mean, come on. Can I get a holy biscuit cake? What the shenanigans is this? Look at this. This is absolutely nuts. Look at the size of that MCU, and they put a cool like holographic sticker on it. Look at this. This is all set up just so gorgeous. All right, let's take a look at the backside. Oh my God, look at this. All right, so I am noticing right off the rip, we've got our plug and play plugs. So if you want to go ahead and just make your life easy, go ahead and plug and play. Now, I've already noticed something. If you haven't, I've noticed something. Have you ever had a flight controller, had an ESC? And if you haven't, that's okay. But you might have experienced before where you've ripped off a connector and then you're screwed. Well, guess what? You may not be able to see it, but right here underneath this, you may not be able to see it, but underneath this, I can see the pads. So that means if I accidentally rip this guy off, which I could just grab pliers right now, rip this off, and I've got my pads underneath. I won't even be affected by it. I'll just cut it, solder it, done. That right there is thinking ahead. And these have an amazing capability, and you can actually put new firmware onto the memory and the flight controller will flash itself. If I go ahead and bust this open, you'll see that this is a beautiful board which has it has a solder connector but also gives you the capability to have all the pads broken out. You solder your motors right here. On this side, you've got some beautiful FETs, plenty of capacitance, shunt resistor. You've got everything you need. It also mounts 20 by 20 or 30 by 30. And if you don't want the 30 by 30, you grab these little tabs and you break them off, and you're good to go. I am very impressed with the way that all of this looks. I have a feeling this is going to be a super awesome build. There's not much support on how to wire this stuff up. They do have a full wiki and support page on their website. Other than a wiring diagram, I really wasn't able to find too much, so I hope that this video helps you out a lot. Let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and mount our stack. So we need to find some good stack screws, push them through, put on our grommets, and get the flight controller put on. All right, so let's try out this stack screw size. Alright, so what I need to do is I need to go ahead and get my antenna put through the Caddx Vista, and after I do that, then I'm going to be ready to go ahead and mount this guy and move on to wiring. This seems pretty dang strong, and it also holds the antenna out away from the drone a little bit rather than having it back here. I feel like I'm going to get some better reception up here. So there's our antenna. Let's go ahead and loosen up the Vista, and we'll go ahead and connect this wire real quick. Okay, so now that I've opened up my metal grill, I want to take advantage and go ahead and solder up my wires, because up under here is not the easiest place to get to. So I'm going to find it much easier to solder everything up now. Alright, so you'll see right here where there's already solder, and all that means is that they went ahead and soldered to it and they tested it. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Now, these are not the easiest pads to get to, so it's kind of hard to even see what they're for. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through it with you so that way you know what each pad is for. So the very first one that I went ahead and soldered up now, and I'm starting all the way from the left if you've got the pads facing upside down upward, if that makes any sense. If you're paying attention, you would know. So the very first wire is your yellow. That is a S-bus, basically. It's the communication for your radio to talk to the Caddx Vista or the DJI module, whatever it is. Just like any other signal, you've got to have a ground. So this is our signal ground. I'm going to go ahead and solder that. Okay, so we now have our signal and our signal ground. Those two wires pertain to flying the DJI radio. And the white wire is our UART TX. This will be for our transmit. So let's go ahead and ploppity-doppity. All right, and the very next one is going to be our yellow. This one is our RX. You've got to have your RX if you want to communicate to and from. So I'm going to go ahead and boom, solder that now. Alright, so there you go. We've got all of our wires soldered up, ready to go. From the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and drop my M2 screw through, and I'm going to do that on the corner of one, either the front or back or front. And then I'll flip it over and I'll set it down so that way they can't come out. Now that's an easy thing to do. You just hold the nut from one side and spin from the other. So I'll grab it just like yay. That way the nut is still, and I'll just spin. Yay, this is so much fun. All right, there's our Vista mounted and ready. Look at that. And that guy, I mean, freak. All right, now, because my bolts aren't the right size, I just grab a pair of cutters. It's not like it's M3 or anything, and I just go, and I don't go too low, but, and, all right, so now that we've got our Vista done, we need to go ahead and mount our camera. There's no sense in having our camera just flopping around, bouncing around while we're trying to work. So it's as simple as just driving a few screws right in through the plate and into the camera. Easy peasy. And then we can just lock it down for now, and then later we'll figure out our exact camera angle. Now, the one beauty in this frame is rather than running the risk of this doing whatever it might do, I'm going to actually take this top plate, I'm going to put it on, I'm going to grab my driver, and I'm going to drive some screws into the top of this guy. Alright, so I went ahead and pulled out my ESC. I want to take a moment now with the ESC out of the build, out of the frame, to go ahead and put on my XT60 lead. And I do want to mention that the Afterburner ESC does not come with one. So if you don't have the stuff laying around, the spare stuff to go ahead and make your own, ouch. And these are some thick wires, so you want to make sure you get your solder all the way through all of the little mini wires that make up the big wire. Alright pilots, let's go ahead and solder up our XT60 to the board. There's just one thing I want to mention. If you're a newbie or don't know any better, on this board it does not tell you. There's no way to know which is negative and which is positive. It's just not displayed. There's no plus, there's no minus, there's no neg, no pos. I mean, there's nothing that gives it away. If you don't know what you're doing, you're pretty screwed. So fortunately for me, I was able to pull out my multimeter, but also I know that my shunt resistor goes on the positive side. So I know that the left there is my positive, so I'm good to go ahead and wire up like that. All right, there's my positive. And here is my negative. And then we'll put a blob of solder and we'll solder it on. Nothing fancy. I just set a little ball right on top, just like that. And then I'm able to go ahead and solder it on. Alright, so let's bring in our frame. We'll go ahead and drop down our ESC. And if I show you inside, you can see that the capacitor is large and in charge, but it's not affecting nothing. So these very first four right here, when I plug this in, the first four batch that's already here, that right there is motors 1 through 4. So those are already in and connected. The colors are weird. I don't really like using red, which is power, for a motor. The motor wires should all be white or should all be just one specific color, but it's not a big deal. So you see these two little wires right here, this green and yellow wire. We're going to call the green one telemetry and we'll call the yellow one current, and we'll need to go ahead and slide those down. So in order to do that, I'm going to flip this upside down, and I know it's probably hard to see a little bit, but I'm just going to lift up on the pin that's back here and I'm going to slide it out just like that. And then I'm going to do the same for the yellow. Just lift up on it. And don't break it off because we still need to use it. So just slide it out just like yay, no harm, no foul. So now flipping this back over, what we'll do is we'll put the green in the very next slot. Okay. And then I'll use my razor blade to push it in just like that. Hopefully you caught wind of that. Now, don't just push it in and go, oh, I'm good. No, don't do that. After you push it in, give it a little tug. See that? I'm going to give a little tug on it. And I'm not trying to break it. I'm just trying to make sure that it's actually connected. Because when I push it into the flight controller, if it's loose, the pin is just going to push it back out. Your quad's not going to work and you're not going to know why. So the next one we're going to do now is our yellow, which will be our current. And that's the very next pin, and I'm just going to pop it in and, ooh. And then once again, I'll just use my razor to make sure it's pushed in. I'll also be careful while pushing with my razor that I'm not going to cut the wire or scratch off the silicone, allowing it to be conductive to the wire next to it. So the last thing to do is our power and our ground. This plug is clearly not for this setup, so they've got a power and a ground, which, I mean, nothing says that that's power and that's ground except the colors. You've got red and black, red being power, black being ground, but they've got a red and a black in a double power. So what we need to do is just simply depin this black one, move it over one, and now we'll have a power and a ground because you can't power up the flight controller without completing the circuit. And I'll go ahead and take my ground and slide it into the third slot. So there we go. We have successfully pinned this plug to work with this flight controller. So now I can push this in, and I know that I'm pinned correctly. So this is the way that yours should look. And what we need to do now is we need to go ahead and mount our motors. I got these beautiful Drainman motors, and if you didn't know, Lumineer makes something called the Lume or Lume skid, and that's these guys right here. And they're actually super awesome because they're super big, they're super thick, and they're super strong, so you can do tons of skidding, tons of landing, and not have to worry about them wearing out quickly. The one cool thing I like about it is it comes with screws, and the screws are extra long so that it can go through the skid, through the foot, into the motor, and have plenty of thread to grab. So after I dip it, I'll slide it through the skid, through the motor foot, and then I'll hold a motor on and I'll spin them up. And as you can see, they are the perfect amount of length. And once it's through, then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll tighten them all down nice and tight. So that way I don't bore you to death. I'll do the other three and then I'll meet you back here. All right, pilots, look at that. That is looking fresh to death. Look at that. So I'll come around with a zip tie. All right, there you go. Motor wires are on and looking good. I'll go ahead and snip my zip tie. So we've got all three wires tinned. Now I need to go ahead and tin my pads. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and grab our tweezers and we'll start with the very first wire. And lastly, I'll go for my third. Boom. Alright, so not to waste your time or bore you to death, I'm going to go ahead and hit the other three, and I'll meet you back here. Let's go. Alright, pilots. Yes, sir. You see how that looks. That looks amazing. Look at them solder joints. Your boy on fleek. We've got our H7 with our connector that we've pinned. Okay, so you may remember that our first four wires, starting from this end, moving to this end, 1, 2, 3, 4, is our motor wires. And they are done at 4, 3, 2, 1. So that means this red one is number 4. And this is going to be tough. These are little wires and a little spot. But we're going to do the best we can. So there's 4. Now I'm going to grab 3. So that's 4, 3, 2, 1. Now we've got our telemetry, which is the green wire. Alright, so now we've got our telemetry wired. Our current is right here. I know it's tough to see, guys, but your current is right here. So that's this yellow wire if you wired along with me. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my positive wire first because it needs to go on the bottom. So to make my life a little bit easier, I mean, we're only going to get so easy with this setup. And there you go. Alright, so our flight controller is now wired to the ESC, which is fantastic. That means we're covered and good to go. Look at that. Not too shabby. So here's the deal. We need to get to TX3, RX3, and TX1. In order to do that, I've got to get down in there. They have not given me enough connectors, and I'm not going to splice wire from my Caddx Vista over to the wire coming out of a jumper. So I'm going to make my life easy, and I'm going to actually take off some of these plugs right here. So let's go ahead and do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and I'm going to snip these. And bam! Look at that. Oh, man, that is awesome. I love that they did that. I mean, I think every flight controller should do that. Some of these guys, they only give you a connector, and if it breaks, you're screwed. Now that we have our first connector off, I'm going to take advantage of these pads. I need to power up my Vista. My Vista can handle full LiPo. Well, the only regulators that are on board are 5 volt, which is not enough to power this guy. So what I'm going to do, per the manual, is I'm going to remove the resistor. I'm going to jump the pad to battery voltage, and then I'm going to wire up my Vista there. So that means we need to go ahead and remove this resistor. Now what I'll do is I'll jump this pad. Boom. Just like yay. So now what I've got, if you can tell, I've jumped the pad over to battery voltage. So now right over here, which is actually designed for the VTX, I'm going to be wired up for full battery voltage. So what I've got is this pad right here, which I just went ahead and ripped that off. Nice and easy and fast like. And I'm going to set that pad there. And what this guy is this is going to be our RX1 and our TX1 that we're going to need. We only need TX1, but they're both there in case you need them. Now the next thing we need is we need RX3 and TX3. Those guys. So here we go. So that's going to have our RX3 and TX3, which is coming right here out of our connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these wires long enough to reach them all. Boom. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and grab our power wire. We'll drop down and we will solder it right there. And then we'll grab our ground and we'll throw that right there. All right. So there you go. We've got our power and our ground. Our Vista now has power. The next one we need to do is our radio. We need to make our radio work. So I need a ground. I'm going to use this ground right here. Going once, going twice. Then I need to use a TX. TX1 is the one that I'm going to use. Alright pilots, so I have now soldered up our TX1 to HDL and I soldered up the ground. So the first one we're going to connect is our RX. And the second one will be our TX. Boom. Alright, so the moment of truth has arrived. We are going to go ahead and plug our smoke stoppie. And then we are going to take our battery lead. Who's ready, pilots? Here we go. I'm terrified. Woo! Got the blue and green. That is sick. Alright, so that looks much better. Check that out. Now we're going to go ahead and plop this guy on. We're going to lock in our screws. Alright, there you go. She is locked, loaded, and ready to go. The only thing I got to do is put on my GoPro mount, which I have right here. And we are off to the sky. Alright pilots, so real quick, this video has definitely ran over the time that I wanted to, but for all the new guys who just got themselves a brand new FlightOne H7 Lightning board, I want you to know how to set it up, because it's you know, it's easy once shown, but if nobody has shown you, it is not easy. So head over to FlightOne.com, okay? This will be the page that'll come up when you get there. And right here, you're going to see downloads. Go ahead and drop down where it says Falco X Firmware Companion. Go ahead and click on that. It's going to load like this. What you want to do is you want to download as to whether you have the Windows or if you have Mac. Once you've downloaded that, you now have the latest configurator. The next thing you need to do is you need to download firmware. So right here, you need to pick the board in which you have. Now, all of these firmwares are the same. I mean, really, well, except for like Revolt, etc. But for the Lightnings, they're all the same. They're set up the same. Everything's the same except, which actually I don't even know if it's live yet, but if it is up to date and it is live, the only difference that these actually have is the OSD startup logo will actually be different. Now, this is true at the time of making this video, so if, you know, 6 months from now they have changed it big time, like for example it has a, you know, maybe a certain rate profile, you know, automatically on it based off that pilot, like Johnny, Wild Willie, and Schizo are all freestyle pilots, as to where Heads Up is a racer, for example. So any which way, you pick the one you got. Me, I've got the Heads Up edition. I'll click it. It automatically begins downloading. You'll see it right here in the bottom left. Now that that's been downloaded, you want to find the folder in which it downloaded, okay? My download popped up right here in my downloads folder, okay? So what you want to do is go ahead and set that to the side. And the next thing you want to do is go ahead and connect your quadcopter. All right, so I just connected my quadcopter, and as you see here, an entire folder or drive has popped up. And this is drive G, okay? So yours is going to do the exact same thing. So what you want to do is you want to go over to the firmware folder. So all you're going to do is grab the new firmware, hold it down, drag it over, and release it. I'm not going to do that because my new firmware, this firmware, is right here already. I've already done that. After you do that, go ahead and unplug your flight controller and then plug it back in, and it will automatically start up on the new firmware. Okay, so now that you've installed your new firmware, it's brand new and it's on your flight controller, and that's what your flight controller is now using, you can go ahead and just move that folder to the side. Now you can go ahead and pull up the Falco X configurator. So boom, here it is. If you've never seen it before, it's new, improved, and looking awesome. So now if I pick up the flight controller, you can see that it's reading the gyro movements, right? My angle, and where it is in space. Now what you'll do is you'll head over to setup drone. Now for me, I don't need to do that. I've already ran through the wizards, and I do not need to show you how to move through the wizards. I mean, it is easy beyond easy. Right here, you have a little note that lets you know the firmware that you're running. So if you were on 10.0.14 and you just dropped in 10.0.18, like we just did, you'll see that it has worked and we are running the latest firmware. Plus, it is letting me know that we are running the latest firmware. So then move through your setup wizards. Once you're done down here, you've got your tuning tab, configuration tab, OSD. You don't need flashing. We already did that. And you don't need to do anything with your terminal. So you're good to go. And you've got some other stuff down here, some links for products and whatnot, website, whatever. So what I want to show you real quick, because this is the only other thing that if you've never done, you may not understand, and that is the OSD. So I'm going to click on OSD, and mine is already set up, but listen to me, I am on DJI, and I'm having no issues with OSD. All of this is working just as it says it is, and if you're not on DJI, all of this is still working just like it says it is. So that's pretty fucking awesome, because we were dealing with like, well, if you have DJI, good luck getting OSD, right? So now all you do is picture this like your actual screen, right? Like this is my screen. So what I've done is I've put my voltage and my cell voltage in the top right-hand corner. I put my arm status up on the top front of the screen. So it's that easy. My pilot name's down here. Let's say you don't like your pilot name there. Go ahead and just close that out and put your pilot name over here, you know, whatever you want. So that's pretty awesome, and that's it. Once you're done, make sure you press save, or whatever you do is not going to work. Now, in order to get your OSD working, head over to where it says configuration, and you are going to click on OSD, and you're going to make sure that this allows you to put your pilot name here. Make sure you're running the system that you're running. Do you want the wording to be large, medium, small? I mean, this is super awesome, super user friendly. If you are a newer pilot, or you're not one of those beta flight tinkerers who just has fun tinkering for hours and hours and hours, you will absolutely love this. This is great. All right, pilots, so that is the quick lowdown. I told you that we would build it. I told you I'd show you how to set it up. I have done that, and now we are going to take it to the sky. I hope that you guys are excited as I am about this H7 hype, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one. Woo! All right, pilots, real quick, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I did want to take a second to show you this. Once I did my first power up and I got in the air for the first time, I had a very bad desync. Now, there may be a possibility that this is going to happen to you too. So to show you real quick how to fix this, super easy fix, jump into BL Heli 32 and change your PWM frequency to 48. Go ahead and change your demag compensation to high and get your motor timing over to 23, flash and write to all 4 ESCs, and you'll be good to go. This is true for the Afterburner ESC, and you know, do a test flight first. You may or may not need to do this, but if so, now you know how.